Welcome to the Cedar Falls regular City Council meeting this March 18th, 2019. I'll now call this meeting to order. Ask for a roll call from Madam Clerk, please.
Miller.
Here.
DeBoer. Here. Cruz.
Here.
Blanford.
Here.
Dara.
Here.
Whelan.
Here.
Green.
Here.
All members present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to the approval of minutes. Item 1, is there a motion to approve the regular meeting of March 4th?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 2, is there a motion to approve the special meeting of February 27th?
So moved.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. I do have a proclamation for the National Nutrition Month. It reads, whereas food is the substance by which life is sustained, and whereas the type, quality, and amount of food that individuals consume each day plays a vital role in their overall health and physical fitness, and whereas Lions International and the local Cedar Falls Lions Club recognize the overall benefit of physical fitness and nutrition in combating diabetes, and therefore have established reducing diabetes as a national project, and whereas to improve walkable access to fresh fruit and vegetables with area farmers markets, and whereas there is a need for continuing nutrition education and a wide-scale effort to enhance healthy eating practices. Now therefore, I, Jim Brown, Mayor of the great city of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim the month of March as National Nutrition Month. I encourage all citizens to join the campaign and become concerned about their nutrition and the nutrition of others in the hope of achieving optimum health for both today and tomorrow. Signed this 18th day of March 2019. I think Luann's here to say a couple words on the proclamation.
Thank you, Council. On behalf of National Nutrition Month, I want to just say thank you for recognizing all the individuals that are raising the level of wellness in our community. As you know, we are a blue zone city, healthy hometown community. And what I wanted to share with you is with research indicating that more than 69% of Americans are obese, and 1 out of 4 healthcare dollars, 1 out of 4 healthcare dollars are spent on diabetes. Diabetes exceeds the cost of the top 5 healthcare conditions in our nation. Healthcare costs are 2 to 3 times higher with those that have diabetes than our non-diabetes patients. About $13,000 are spent average on that patient with diabetes. We want to make sure and ensure that nutrition and healthy choices are available for our entire community. There are some projects that I want you to be aware because Blue Zone's Healthy Hometown is active and alive in this community. What I want you to realize is that we have some members here from the Cedar Falls Food Co-op that are trying to establish a grocery store here in Cedar Falls to bring local foods closer to our availability. We have dietitians and educators that are present. A new project that you may not be aware of is that Unity Point, Cedar Falls Lions Club, Cedar Valley Makers, and myself are coming together to form a garden project with children, and we're going to call it Eating Healthy for Life. So there are many new projects, there are many projects here that are instilling nutrition that is vital and important for our community. And I really appreciate you issuing this proclamation for us to help substantiate that. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Leanne. That might be the first applause on a proclamation. Well done. Moving on to the next, is there any agenda revisions, Madam Clerk?
I have no agenda revisions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 3 is a public hearing to consider adopting the city's code of ordinances. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So move.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any written communications filed with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before we move on to public comment, I believe Attorney Kevin Rogers just give a brief update towards this public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, staff has been working on recodification for nearly 2 years now. It's been a long project. We work with a company called MuniCode, putting necessary changes in to update the code, to incorporate state law changes, and to do some clarification in our Code of Ordinances. So we're here today to ask Council to adopt a new Code ordinances on its first reading.
Thank you. I'll now open it up for any public comment on this public hearing. State your name and address. Make sure the microphone's right there for me, please.
Jim Skane, 2215 Clay Street, Advocates for the People of Cedar Falls. The reason I'm speaking at this particular point is that typical of these hearings, we have a very limited amount of information. Even the account that was given by Attorney Rogers was very limited. We don't know what was taken out. We don't know what was updated. And there should be a document that outlines exactly what was. Because how can you vote on a new code of ordinance if you don't know what they've done to the code of ordinance? There may be some things that they drop out that are very vital to the researching of what the laws are for Cedar Falls. And it seems to me, and this is one of the objections that I've raised before, is that these aren't hearings. I can get up and make some points, and then the mayor will, if I ask a question, say, oh, we'll get to it later, and we never get an answer to those questions. The point is, if a point of information is raised during the hearing, it should be answered at that point. Otherwise, it's not a hearing. We haven't had a hearing for as long as you've been mayor, Mr. Mayor. We've not had a hearing. We've had the opportunity to say something about something that we were trying to find out about, but that's all we've had. And it's unfortunate that on something as important as the Code of Ordinances are going through a revision, and there's no way for the people to know what those changes are. I mean, even if there was a document on the internet, which is not the best way, but that just outlines some of the changes. We don't know. It's like buying a pig in a poke.
Thank you. Any further comment from the public in this particular public hearing? I'd rather go through, open it up for council if you don't mind. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone further in the public hearing? Hearing and seeing none, I declare the hearing closed. Item 4 is pass an ordinance adopting the Code of Ordinances for the City of Cedar Falls upon its first consideration. Is there a motion, please?
So moved, Mr. Mayor. Second.
Motion second. We'll open it up for council for discussion. Mr. Brewer?
I just wanted to comment that I do have the entire recodification notes, and I wanted to question, they're all color-coded for easy reading. Were these available online as well?
Online in the packet?
I mean, it's like 70 pages, but yes. So the public was able to see it via the internet.
That's right.
Very good. Thank you. Anything further from council? Mr. Dara?
I would just like to add to that a little bit. These changes are bringing us up to the state requirements for our ordinances and codes, or getting rid of things. We're not adding new ones, per se. All council have had these for over a month. We got a copy that has things that have been eliminated and struck through or highlighted in red for us. So I spent evenings going over the whole ordinance package, and it's pretty benign what we're doing. We're just bringing it up to standard. So I wanted to pass that on.
Thank you. Mr. Dara?
And you correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this the first of 3 readings?
Yes, it is. Yes.
There's another month.
Thank you. Anything further from council? The motion second requires a roll call vote, please.
I'm voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 5, I'm going to break this item up. I've mentioned it to council, I've mentioned it to the public as well. There's 2 distinct things happening here with the development on West 12th Street and Union Road. First is a land use map amendment. which I will read through and go through the proper motions for public hearing. And then we will reconsider as well the rezoning and go through the proper procedure for the public hearing, just so folks are aware that that's what we're doing based off of the agenda and just moving this to have two distinct offerings to it. So I will start with the public hearing on the amendment to the schematic land use map by changing the destination from greenways and floodplain to greenways, floodplain, and planned development for the location of the corner of West 12th Street and Union Road. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So move.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any written communications filed with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before we move to public comment, I will ask Planner David Sturch to give us a background on the land use map amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you said, this property is located at the southeast corner of Union Road and 12th Street. It's a 42-acre parcel. Looking at land use map amendment for this area. The original application came in for rezoning, so we take a look at the land use to make sure it agrees with that. And since 2012, this area is located in a greenways floodplain land use designation, and basically that is identified for floodplain and buffers, parkland, recreational areas. There's some stormwater management features that we'll address here in the future if the zoning goes through, and that's covered in the preliminary plat. And other components with that is like open spaces and trail systems. So that's the idea for greenways and buffers in floodplain areas. Moving along, I just want to give a little history with the idea of this being created for that area of greenways and floodplains. The map was changed in 2012, excuse me, and just prior to that, the floodplain map is identified here in red area, and that was based on our firm maps from 1985 and 2011. So really there's no change to the firm map there. It almost encompasses the whole 42-acre parcel. Well, they did some old modeling, some older elevation data. You can kind of see I threw out there in a blue line is basically the flood profile identified there, and that's the cross section through that area that delineates the elevation of the floodplain in that area, and that's identified as 949 feet. And then those three dots that run to the southwest area is the actual ground elevation. So really the floodplain doesn't correspond with the actual ground elevation, as you can see there. You know, it starts at 950 and progresses down south southerly to 955 to 960. So really, you're looking at a 6 to 11 foot difference from the flood channel to the outer edge of that existing floodplain that's identified in red. So what had happened since then is what we have. Well, I should back up, and these are just snapshots of what modeling, digital modeling shows you. You know, these were, that green shaded area corresponds to that area there. So these are DEM 30-meter resolution pictures. So try to pinpoint the floodplain that runs through this site on that shaded area on the left-hand side. So that's what they used to do. The newer models is identified in this LiDAR image, which is that gray area. So as the floodplain modeling gets better and better over the years, we get better data, which corresponds from the flood profile and the elevation of the actual ground site itself. So I just wanted to throw that out for everyone to see what we've done in the past and what we do now. So moving along, that floodplain was changed in 2014. So this is our current floodplain in this area. So it does significantly reduce that impact of that area. It's better comparison to the flood profiles and the ground elevation. And again, it does reduce that floodplain area, opens that rest of that property up for development. So the idea is to change this from greenways or maintain that floodplain as greenways and floodplain, but add the planned development component to this, those areas on the outside of that area for future development. The idea is still maintain some of those elements found in the planned development and greenways with stormwater management, trails adjacent to the development and within the development. There are already existing adjacent parks and open spaces. We've got the golf course on the north side of 12th Street and Robinson Dresser just to the east side of that. So again, the idea is to adjust this land use area to incorporate that planned development component of this.
Thank you. I will open it for public comment on this public hearing. Just give your name and address, please, in that microphone.
Good evening. I'm Melissa Tierney, CEO of New Aldea Lifescape, 7511 University Avenue, Cedar Falls. Thanks for the opportunity to share a few words with you this evening, Council. In June, New Aldea will celebrate 61 years of helping older adults in Cedar Falls live better. You may have first known us as Cedar Falls Lutheran Home or now doing business as New Aldea Lifescapes. As a life plan community, we offer adults a future plan that includes a variety of lifestyle choices, amenities, services, and care. Our Christian mission is to enhance lives. Our distinctive vision embraces living better. NAL is a vibrant and evolving community consisting of some 300+ residents living in unique neighborhoods designed to meet varying needs and lifestyles. Our Live Better, Live Well program, launched in 2011, more broadly serves the Cedar Falls community, from clinical care and wellness to hospitality services, offering some of the area's best live entertainment. In doing so, and in partnership with progressive city leadership at the time, we turned a traditional aging paradigm on its head by pioneering a blended service model, bringing the community into the life of New Aldea rather than removing residents from the larger community. I'm happy to say this model is now emulated throughout the nation. To further expand this evolving paradigm, for the past 5 years we have studied, researched, and surveyed to define and articulate our next unique Living Better offering, Terraces at West Glen. Our vision for a new neighborhood at 12th and Union expands the blended community model benefits and aligns with many of the findings documented in the Cedar Falls Comprehensive Plan and many other studies as well. We, too, are planning for an increasing 55 to 70 age demographic who may view Cedar Falls, because of its quality of life, as an attractive destination in which to live. Our neighborhood plans and location must meet some unique requirements and criteria, as David was sharing. Walkable neighborhoods intentionally designed with differentiated housing styles to meet varying lifestyles, including multi-story condos, single-family homes that offer quality, customized custom construction, and high-end finishes. Incorporated spaces for neighborhood socialization and entertaining, green space and landscaping features, access to trails, recreation, and wellness, and an overall neighborhood design and aesthetics that enhance surrounding neighborhoods. At the end of our due diligence period, which is approaching, our goal is to purchase the property at Union and 12th and move forward with our development. Terraces at West Glen is a significant investment for now and an investment in Cedar Falls, one we see as critical for advancing our mission while supporting projected housing demand and further enhancing quality of life in Cedar Falls. I thank the interested neighbors for participating in our previous neighborhood meeting. We had a lot of engaging comments and discussion that was very invigorating, and I thank you, Council, for your review.
Thank you very much. Anyone further for public comment, this public hearing?
Good evening. My name is Mark Sigworth. I reside at 1028 Cherrywood Drive here in Cedar Falls. I've lived there for the last 22 years, so I'm going to give a little history on this. I'm not new to the area. I've seen what happens out there. I addressed the Planning and Zoning Commission twice now, reference to proposed rezoning and development on the southeast corner of Union and 12th. The developer would like to see that rezone from agricultural to RP. Three main concerns I brought up to the board were this: the amount of traffic that's proposed for this campus. There's a lot of traffic out there already, and when you put all this new development there, the traffic is going to get very, very busy. Keep that in consideration. They're talking about a 3-story structure at the intersection there at 12th and Union. Everywhere around there is either a farm field, which was the area we're talking about now, or single-family dwelling. They want to put a 3 multi-story building at that intersection. One, it's going to look out of place. Two, it's going to be an eyesore to the current residents like myself. The other issue I brought up was a serious issue of the stormwater management for the property in question and how changing the zoning from agricultural to residential would affect the surrounding developments of Cherrywood Acres to the northwest where I reside, Wild Horse to the west, and Lexington Heights to the southeast. Needless to say, I was very disappointed and very concerned when I asked the members of the commission and Mr. Sturch if any of them had done their homework and actually went out and witnessed the transformation of that area in question during or after a substantial rainfall. When I asked each one of those people on that Planning and Zoning Commission if they've actually physically gone out to that area and looked and seen what happened after a good rain, none of them had done it. Mr. Sturch hadn't done it. No one from the city has actually gone out there and physically looked at this area after a very good rain. And you had an ample opportunity this past year. It was very wet out there. Nobody did. No one on the commission or the city had ever gone out in that area to look at Cherrywood, Wild Horse, or Lexington. The commission didn't listen to myself or residents from these subdivisions. Instead, they tabled the issue, and instead of tabling the issue until they could make an educated vote, they passed it and sent it on to you. I urge you to listen to myself and other local residents who have lived in that area and not to rely on information given to you by a third party who would have a monetary and vested interest in developing that property. I'm going to ask all of you the same question I asked the commission. I ask you, have any of you actually gone out in that area and witnessed that area and how it changes, the area in question, after a substantial rainfall? This is kind of like high school. Please raise your hand if you've actually physically seen it.
We need to move on with the public comments,
Okay.
please.
Obviously, I don't think you have. I don't think the commission did, and it's very frustrating from a citizen's point of view. I don't think you understand that there is a FEMA process. There is a FEMA study that was submitted for 1985, 2011, 2014, and now the preliminary study. I've looked at all of them. They're all the same. Nothing has changed. They're all saying the same floodplain. Mr. Sturch will tell you it's going to get smaller, but it hasn't. We got a lot of rain last summer. It hasn't gotten smaller. That 2-foot creek goes from a 2-foot creek to a very large river when we get a substantial rain. Those studies all look the same. Since 2011, almost every house in the lower part of Lexington Heights and all the homes in the Wild Horse subdivision have been built. They are the future developmental projects that could and have increased flood discharge and increased flood hazards. The water runoff where Wild Horse subdivision used to drain to the south and west no longer. It comes under Union Road and into the property in question. The area of Cherrywood all runs into the golf course area and then to this area of question. To make you understand, all the water from the golf course, all the water from Cherrywood, all the water from Wild Horse, all drains into this area, and most of it comes through a 3-foot tile. And when it comes through very quickly. I stand here and I ask you, please table this until you can go out and physically see it this summer and see how that land changes. Till you can wait till FEMA gets the study done. Mr. Sturch talked about rushing the study. It's an 18 to 20 month study. And for the record, if you'd like to see it, that was given to the city on the 19th of January 2019. Please don't rush a study. Don't rush your decision. Make an educated decision on this matter. Because you're dealing with the people upstream, you're dealing with the people that want to develop this property, but you're also dealing with the people south of that, and that is Lexington Heights. And you've all heard the issues in Lexington Heights and how much water they have to deal with down there. It's going to be like a slip and slide, people. You are going to funnel all that water right into their backyards, and they can't handle it right now. Please, I ask you, table it, do your homework. That's all we ask. You have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. Please don't take it lightly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone further for public comment on this public hearing? Hearing and seeing none, I'll declare the hearing closed. Item 6 is a resolution amending the schematic land use map by changing the designation for property located at the corner of West 12th Street and Union Road. Is there a motion, please? Hearing no motion, that matter fails. Am I doing this right?
You have to get a motion.
I have to get a motion. Yep. That matter does fail for not receiving a motion, and we will move on. Item 5, the second portion there for the rezoning is now a moot point. Moving on to item 8, the public hearing of proposed amended and restated agreement for private development with Buckeye Corrugated Incorporated. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So move.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any written communications filed with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Again, before moving on to the public comment, there is Planner Shane Graham is here to talk about this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. If council remembers, back in September 2017, City Council approved a development for an agreement for private development with Buckeye Corrugated, Inc. To build a new 171,000 square foot industrial building out in the West Viking Road Industrial Park. That agreement had some language in it that said it had to be done by December 31st of 2018. Also had a minimum permit valuation of $7,100,000. We've been working with the company over the past few months. They have not met that deadline because some unforeseen issues with the soil out there, which delayed their project by a little bit. So they are still working towards completing the project. It's not done as of right now. It should be done by the summertime. So what we're looking to do is to amend the agreement to one, extend the timeline to the end of 2019, which then would kick in the minimum assessment agreement at January 1st of 2020, and also to increase the minimum assessment amount from the existing amount, which was a little over $8 million with the building and the land, up to just over $10 million to go for that increase of the building permit valuation when they actually pulled the permit. So with those things, we've been working with the company. The company was in agreement with those amended changes. The amended agreement has been reviewed by the city attorney, and staff would recommend approval of that tonight.
Thank you, Shane. Appreciate that. I'll now open it up for public comment on this public hearing. Okay.
There evidently are some advantages to the company, Buckeye Corrugated, because there's things talked about here about minimum assessment and doing that kind of change. And I think that this is probably another one of those examples of a company getting a tax advantage that the rest of us wouldn't get. And I know my comment will not receive a reply because it never receives a reply. But I think that Cedar Falls is in financial straits because there's a lot of money that has been going, and evidently now you have the South Cedar Falls Urban Renewal District. I don't know if this is in that district or not, but it does raise the question, why do companies count and the people don't?
Thank you. Anyone further for this particular public hearing? Hearing and seeing none, I'll declare the hearing closed. Item 9 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of amended and restated agreement for private development. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 10 is a public hearing on a proposed agreement for private development and payment of certain economic development grants. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Any written communications filed with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Again, before public comment, I'll have our planner, Shane Graham, say a few words on this particular public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. Staff has been working with Martin Brothers for the past several months regarding 5,600 square foot office addition out of their main office building at 6623 Chancellor Drive. Typically for office type projects, we do offer incentives based on the valuation of the project. It is in addition, however, the addition was valued at about $1.6 million. It does meet our requirements for incentives. What we offer for office projects is a 5-year rebate, sliding scale rebate agreement. Again, with this addition to this building, they will be adding additional jobs too, so it's good to see the growth for Martin Brothers. And again, so staff would be recommending approval of this development agreement.
Thank you, Shane. Now open it up for public comment on this public hearing.
In other words, the first year, they only have to pay like 25% of what they would have paid in taxes, and only in the fifth year do they pay the taxes that the rest of us pay, and then they could apply for another grant, which they do. It seems, again, a matter of priorities. Why is it necessary for a company like Martin Brothers, who wants to expand, to get paid for expanding when there's no proof that there will be more people employed? And it is this kind of thing that goes on, council, not every council meeting, but council after council, where it goes through like that. People don't even question it. I really am disturbed about the priorities. In the last 5 years, we have seen a tremendous reduction in Cedar Falls services to the people, at the same time that a lot of grants are being given to companies. I mean, we used to have a beautiful, beautiful fire department. Now, I think it's in shambles, no matter what is said about these cross-trained people. I've investigated that kind of thing, and you don't get, you know, I can put, and this is the point, I can put 25 people on a field against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but that doesn't mean that those 25 people will be able to do the job. And the thing about it is that here, once again, in order for a company to increase its business, it is being given a rather substantial tax break. But it's a pattern. And I object because I want to advocate for the people of Cedar Falls. I don't think the council does enough of that.
Thank you, Mr. Skane. Anyone further public comment on this public item? Hearing and seeing none, I'll declare the hearing closed. Item 11 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an agreement for private development. Is there a motion, please?
So move.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion or questions from council? Mr. Boer?
This added a $1.5 million value to the building, is that correct?
Yes.
A little over that, actually.
Yeah, when they obtained the building permit in 2018, I think it was almost $1.6 million valuation that when they obtained the building permit.
Thank you.
Anything further from council? Mr. Wieland?
I would like to make just one comment about the industrial park. The industrial park started in 1995, I think, and we lost a lot of money on it when it started. But after we got it going, we had to put in the infrastructure and all the services in order to attract businesses. During that same time period, other states were stealing businesses away from us. I've done studies on that industrial park, and the internal rate of return, because we offer these things and we're able to get businesses in here, is 21%. You put your money in the bank, you're lucky to get 2%. We had to do a lot of work to do it in a very complex business situation. Our taxes on our people are low because we make investments like this, because the return is unbelievable once you get a business in place that's a going business. So I wanted to correct the view that we make bad deals. We do not. it pays off, and it pays off in terms of the number 21. Now, I haven't done an update on that for quite a number of years, but we're still investing in it, and we're still seeing the return. We wouldn't have a lot of the businesses there if we didn't compete with other states by allowing some time while the increase in investment is allowed to continue for 5 years until it's totally taxed. And it's just the increase in what they're doing. I've said enough. I just wanted to bring that to people's attention who are watching council from their homes.
Thank you, Mr. Whedon. Mr. Green?
Mr. Mayor, just a question for city staff. With this 5-year property tax rebate, is that just applied to the $1.6 million addition? Or is that so basically prorated to that part of the property, or is that for the entire property?
Correct. It is just for the actual added value for this project.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or discussion from council? This requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering if we could refer back to item number 5. I'm not sure council had an opportunity to ask questions. I think there may have been at least a couple of us that wanted to inquire some from city staff, so I wonder if that was possible.
Sure.
Referring to 5, 6, and 7, I assume?
5, 6,
yes.
and 7, right?
Thank you.
Is that applicable, Attorney Rogers?
You can take the matter now out of order if council approves it by motion.
If they approve the motion to reconsider 5, 6, and 7 is your motion, Mr. Blanford. Is there a second to Mr.
Second.
Blanford? Motion and second?
Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. That motion does carry. Moving back to item 5, again, it was a little bit different because we did split it into land use and then rezoning. And I apologize if typically we wait for the council to open up with questions and comments once it's on the table and motioned and seconded. So I understand that difference there in terms of moving forward. At this point in time, if there are questions, I would still like to put it on the table in item number 6, or try to anyway, and then be able to ask questions of staff and or each other. Is there a motion, a resolution amending this land schematic land use map by changing the designation for property located at the corner of West 12th Street and Union Road? Is there a motion to discuss that, or put it on the table?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Clearly open up for questions and comments from council. Mr. Boer.
Yeah, one question I had was on the new flood maps that we're doing, can you explain what change there might be from the ones that were before?
I go back
I
to
know
that.
they're all preliminary right now, but
I go back to that map on the overhead. This is our current floodplain map. The new floodplain map tightens that up a little bit more with, again, better data, better elevation information. They use LiDAR imaging. So instead of having a plus or minus difference of 5 feet, it's narrowed down to 4 to 8 inches. So that's your elevation difference.
And
so this new proposed map that's going to be out in 2020. The study is done. It's just they go through the process to look at some areas, but this area is pretty much completed.
okay. And then my follow-up question to that is, when any development, no matter what development it might be on this piece of land, what improvements to the water condition would be made?
Well, as part of the platting process, we have to go through by ordinances, develop a stormwater report, stormwater detention analysis, and that shows routing of the adjacent properties, and then they have to collect the stormwater generated on site, and they have to detain it and then release it. So as part of the ordinance, when the next step after the rezoning is the platting process. So it's.
But currently, the only water would be maybe any tilling that's been done in the farm fields?
Well, there's some runoff coming from the north and from the west, running down through that drainage area. And then, of course, you got the farmland, so there's probably some tiling that runs off those higher slopes down to this area. So it's basically uncontrolled right now.
That's what I was wondering.
Just one more point of clarification. I wanted to make it clear that the current map, which is what we're talking about tonight, which is shown on the screen here, is the current map that's on the books. So this is not preliminary. This is the map that is on the books right now. That's the 2014 map, and that is what applies to this area. So that's one of the reasons that we think it's reasonable to reconsider the land use map in the comp plan, because the comp plan was done in 2012, and that was based on that 2011 map that had the much larger area. And in 2014, then we had the better data, and this is the current map. So this is the current map on the books, and then there's a preliminary map that the study's already been done by FEMA, and that will further refine this 2014 map. And all indications it will be reduce that floodplain even more to reflect the actual ground elevations.
Mr. Blanford.
Ms. Howard or Mr. Is it the opinion of your staff that a development in this area would improve the water retention as opposed to the agricultural land that it is now, based on what we normally require from a development?
Yes, I think when you do stormwater management with a development, of course, you're going to add stormwater basins to capture those storms and detain it on site and release it at a lower rate into that floodplain. So generally, as development occurs, it's much more controlled with urban development than it would be with the farm field, with just the runoff from the farm field.
Thank you.
Anything further from council? Mr. Miller?
Can we put the map back up there? It looks like that, wherever that goes, it intersects down there with Waterbury. Are we positive that we're not creating, I believe the previous speaker mentioned some other issues that are down there. Are there issues down there, or are we positive that what we're doing here is not going to have a negative influence down there?
I think what we'll look at when they bring in the subdivision plat, we'll be able to look at those engineering numbers a lot more closely and make sure that what's happening upstream of what's happening in the Lexington subdivision will not affect the downstream properties.
Thank you.
Mr. Cruz, did you have a question?
This blue area, is this considered the 100-year flood or 500-year? What designation does this have?
The blue shade is the 100-year flood, and you can kind of see on the edge of that, kind of an orange or brown shade, that's a 500-year flood. So most of it's in the 100-year flood, and then through the channel is the floodway.
So then going to the Lexington Height issue, can anybody elaborate what's happening down there? Are we getting flooded basements, or what issues are taking place there?
When that subdivision was designed in 2012, 2013, they had to model this reach to create that water crossing or the street crossing of Waterbury Drive over that channel. So what the engineer designed was some ponding upstream of the road and downstream of the road. So it kind of creates some ponding around some of those homes, and then it just allows the water to flow through there. So again, when in heavy events, that does go through there pretty good, but the ponding will be looked at as we look at this next subdivision coming in.
I'm curious how well it performed in this last year. You say there's ponding. Have we had complaints to the city?
There are designed ponds, I should say, as part of that. So the ponds fill up, go under the road, and then release down through the south end of that Lexington Heights subdivision.
Okay. Anything further from council? It's been motioned and second towards the land use map. This requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving back to item 5 in the second portion, this is a public hearing and proposed rezoning from A1 Agricultural District to RP, Planned Resident District of property located in the corner of West 12th Street and Union Road. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any written communications with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Again, Mr. Sturch on the rezoning portion.
Yeah, again, it's the same 42-acre parcel there at the corner of Union and 12th Street. And when we look at rezoning criteria, we take a look at 3 tests there. The first one is the future land use. Does the zoning proposal agree with that? The second, is it access to utilities, sanitary sewer service? And then does the property have adequate roadway access? So these are the elements that we take a look at for rezoning. The first one is the land use, which was, again, approved here just now, going from greenways and floodplain to plan development in greenways and floodplain. So that agrees with the proposed development here. The second criteria is utilities. We have a sanitary sewer that runs through that drainage way. This is the Cherrywood sanitary sewer that was runs diagonal through the property. And then there's some water lines that run along 12th Street and Union Road. So as this develops, everything's going to be tied into those utilities. There are sewer connections and water main connections as part of this, so that will be paid as the final plat comes in for this 42-acre parcel. And then along with utilities, we look at nearby streets and roads, and 12th and Union support this type of development. The concept here shows that there are connections onto those roads. We want to show some future connections to internal properties, so to speak, to the south and to the east. So those connections are important to have circulation. It disperses the traffic through the existing neighborhoods. So the roadway access is provided to the site. Basically, so the RP designation is planned residential, so that allows a mixture of uses from single family to multifamily development. We take a look at a concept plan that was submitted as part of the rezoning, and as you can see, there's a layout of a number of 1 and 2 unit patio homes. There's a couple larger buildings as indicated in the site plan. There are multi-story, multi-unit buildings there, and as those come along, we do a site plan review on those buildings through planning, zoning, and city council, and we want to take a look at the building design, the landscaping, the screening, the building height issues on that, along with setbacks, and so that will be at a future date, but again, it's part of this whole concept plan. And then following the rezoning, we again go into the subdivision platting, which is a preliminary plat that identifies the lots and the roads, and then all the stormwater management areas, which is storm sewer, detention basins, and drainage routing through the site. So with that, we want to recommend approval on this, and along with that concept development, we have a developmental procedures agreement that outlines what the developer will do as part of this development.
Thank you, David. We'll open this portion up to public comment. Anyone wishes to comment on this portion? Hearing and seeing none, declare this hearing closed. Moving on to item number 7 is pass an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances by removing property located in the southeast corner of West 12th Street and Union Road from the A1 to the RP. Upon its first consideration, is there a motion, please?
So move.
Second.
Motion second. We'll open it up to council for questions to staff. Mr. Boer?
The main difference between a mixed-use district and the RP would be obviously no commercial. Now, in the mixed use, you have to list different density areas. Is that not required in the RP?
The RP, that developmental agreement outlines the density with that. So it kind of outlines the number of 1 and 2 unit homes and the multi-unit homes. It lists that in the development. And this is identified roughly about 3 to 4 units per acre, which is pretty low density in this 42 acres if you spread that out through the entire development.
So you have currently the numbers then as to what percentage is considered low density and what would be?
Low density
sounds like there's
is...
really no high.
Excuse me?
There's no high density, it doesn't sound like, in this area.
No, as you take the whole 42 acres as a whole and you apply that, so, low density is roughly up to 6 to 8 units per acre, medium is up to maybe 12, and high density is above that, 12, 15 plus.
Okay.
Anything further from council? Mr. Miller?
If we can put the map back up there, the site plan. The ponds there, I assume, are detention basins for overflow there, or there's full all the time, or how does that work?
Well, they're going to be designed as, I believe, dry basins until that area has some water running through it, so that'll be collected through the streets, storm sewers, and the land or the grass and runoff from those areas. So they fill those up, and then they release them back into the system.
Essentially a detention basin, correct?
Yeah, they are designed as detention basins. So you'll get some runoff from the baseball field, and then from the north, from the golf course, and then from the west off of Union Road. There's the Wild Horse development there on the west side of Union Road. The ditch is basically their detention behind those houses, and then it runs through a pipe underneath Union Road, and that will be piped over to this area. Right now, it just runs across the field into that floodplain area.
As well, the homes, are there basements on these homes next to the floodplain anywhere? We know that?
I believe they're just slab on. Are they some, yeah. You want to go open?
John Biederman, civil engineer with Fairgram. To answer the question on the basements, along the floodplain, we're looking at just slab on grade.
Perfect.
And then in the far southwest corner, in that higher ground, that's where we're looking at the potential for a basement.
Thank you.
Anything for Mr. Brewer?
Just a curiosity out of that same question then, in the event of a tornado or storm, is there a storm shelter that's nearby for everyone? Or planned in one of the larger buildings?
Anything further from council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr.
I guess I really didn't, maybe I didn't explain it well or ask it properly, but my question earlier about Waterbury, has there been complaints by those residents down there with water flow coming down through that street area? Yes or no?
We had some residents come in during the planning and zoning discussion on that, and I think the idea is we're going to look at this preliminary plat, and we want to meet with those residents again here in the next couple months to discuss some of those plans and what has been presented for this development and how it can improve their situation at that end.
So was the plan at that time showing these detention ponds, I'm assuming? Or has this been modified as time went on as a result of what was said?
No,
in
they've
planning
had
and zoning?
they've had detention ponds identified in their concept plan, because that'll basically reflect what is going to be listed in the plat.
And they're sized for the water runoff and all the criteria associated with that?
Yes. According to our ordinance, they have to be sized and detained and collected and then released at a slower rate.
Okay.
Good.
One thing I'd like to clarify about that, we did have neighbors come to the meeting, but then they did meet with staff afterwards. We had a couple people that came and met with myself individually and with planning. And we explained to them how when we go through that preliminary plat, we'll be looking at the stormwater modeling. And their primary concern was to make sure that it doesn't, that there are no other impacts outside of what's already been designed, what they know about there. We've not had any property damage reported to us. We've had people that watch that and take pictures during the storm and know that the ponding is happening there, which is the way it's designed right now.
Anything further from council? Thank you. This requires a roll call vote, please.
I'm voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to new business, the consent calendar, the following items will be acted upon by a voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion. If someone from the council wishes to pull an item separately, or someone from the public. Is there any such request from council? From the public? 14. Item 14. 23. We're on the consent calendar now, so they'll need to wait for the resolution calendar. It's okay, we'll note it. Anything further from the public on the consent calendar? I'll summarize that calendar minus item 14. Item 12 is receive and file the resignation of Hillary Oberly as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'd like to thank Hillary for her service to the city. Item 13 is approve the following recommendation of the mayor relative to the appointment of members to boards and commissions. Janine Johnson for the Historic Preservation Commission and Leslie Perdeau for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Item 15 is receive and file the City Council work session minutes of March 4th. 16 is receive and file communications from the Civil Service Commission. 17 is approve the request for temporary signs at various locations for the Waterloo Cedar Falls Annual Coin Show on March 25th through the 31st. Item 18 is approve the request for a temporary sign for Valley Lutheran School on April 12th. 19 is approve a request for parking variances for the St. Patrick Church garage sale, April 24th to 26th. And item 20 is approve applications for permits and licenses. Is there a motion to approve the consent minus 14, please?
Motion to approve.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 14 reads, receive and file the Committee of the Whole minutes of March 4th relative to the Planning and Zoning Commission interview, the 2019 Municipal Operations and Programs Work Plan, and bills and payroll. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? From the public?
I raise this question because over the years that I have been looking at minutes, I find that the minutes that we receive for city council's activities and council committees are appropriate to some professional club that meets once every so often and has a short business meeting as part of it. But they're totally inadequate as records of what happens at these meetings. And even as we talk about the agenda item, planning and zoning, that's different. 2019 municipal operations and program work plan. Now, you're just asking that these put on file. They'll be talked about, but that one specifically, you could summarize. You could have a paragraph saying the work plan has this, that, and the other things, so that people know what's being put on file. And then it's always amazed me, maybe the council in its correspondence to it alone gets an indication of bills and payroll. I mean, that's something that the people should know. I mean, that's public information. It's not a secret document, and yet we don't know it. And it's, time and time again, we're asked, as for instance, even this list, but especially the next list, to decide between Friday and this meeting time whether we have some concerns about any of these items. And all that happens during these meetings is that whatever statements on the agenda is repeated, so we don't even know anything then. And I've been told that, oh yeah, you can get onto the internet, but I would say that at least half the people, maybe more, don't even have access to the internet, and therefore they can't even go into it. But the agenda should be more informative. The minutes should be not just so-and-so moved and seconded, and the motion was voted 7-0. So I am not objecting to the idea of receiving and filing the Committee of the Whole minutes, but I am concerned that as a person who tries to be well-informed, doesn't even know what some of these items are about.
Thank you. Anyone further from the public to comment? Open up for council if they so desire, Mr. Boer.
The presentation that was done with any particular item like tonight's with the PowerPoint type of presentation. Is that kept on file then with the minutes?
Yes, yes. Yep, thank you. Anything further, Mr. Blanford?
I know we've talked about it before, but I just want to clarify, all of this information becomes available to the public at the exact same time that council gets it. It's available online. It's in the book that's there at the podium and at City Hall. At any time, we can either provide a copy in person or call us and we'll mail you one. The city clerk provides minutes with every meeting and has for 30 years, I believe.
Well, not Jackie.
Not Jackie, but... and those are available along with all of the items in the packet, including bills and payroll, and can be accessed both for the current meeting and going back, I'm not even sure how long. So the information is available if anyone has any interest. I don't want there to be any confusion that people can't have access to this information if they want it. It's absolutely available, and we want to take every opportunity to provide it in any fashion that we need to.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Just to add on to Councilman Bamford's comments, it's not just that it's provided at the same time, it's exactly the same material. And we receive it from the same place that the public does. So I just want to, except for things that happen during executive session, is required by law to be kept somewhat quieter. Everything else you absolutely have access to.
Thank you. Anything further from council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just maybe a question or a comment. I'm assuming our minutes might be abbreviated, but in lieu of the recordings and the print material, full disclosure is there. And I guess that's the only...
Absolutely. Anything further from council? It's been motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item is a resolution calendar. These items will be acted upon by a roll call vote in a single motion without separate discussion unless someone from the council or the public requests an item to be pulled for such consideration. Any such requests from council? 23. Anyone else from the public to pull an item? I'm sorry? I'm sorry, not public forum. We're on the resolution calendar. Yeah. That's okay. Hearing and seeing none, I'll abbreviate the resolution calendar minus item 23. Item 21 is a resolution approving and adopting revised job classifications. Item 22 is approving and authorizing execution of a facilities use agreement relative to the use of the community center. Item 24 is approving and authorizing execution of purchase agreements, construction easements in conjunction with the Oak Park Sanitary Sewer Repair Project. Item 25 is receiving and filing the bids and approving and accepting the low bid of $13.5 million for the West First Street Reconstruction Project. Item 26 is approving and authorizing execution of an application for funding relative to the Main Street Reconstruction Project. Item 27 is approving and authorizing execution of an application for funding relative to the Lake Street Trail Project. Item 28 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a farm lease agreement. 29 is approving and authorizing execution of a supplemental agreement for the 2019 engineering services. 30 is approving the Industrial Park Land Acquisition and Engineering Design Service Project. 31 is receiving and filing and setting April 1st as a date of public hearing for the 2019 Permeable Alley Project. Item 32 is a resolution setting April 1st as a date of public hearing on proposed amendments to the College Hill Neighborhood Overlay Zoning District. Is there a motion to approve the resolution calendar minus item 23?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 23 is a resolution approving, authorizing execution of a purchase agreement, utility easements, grading easement in conjunction with the West First Street Reconstruction Project. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Open up for council. Mr. Public. Your name and address, please, and make sure the microphone's right there.
John Roth, 4212 Sterling Lane. Thank you. Regarding item 23, specifically the property at 815 West First Street, as everybody has there in front of them, the purchase agreement and the tenant agreement. The purchase agreement clearly also outlines that I'm a tenant or the lessor of that property. I do have a sublease agreement with the subtenant to that property, of which I believe there's an approval from her on there. I just had a couple issues with this, and I know I've spoke with city staff quite a bit last fall regarding this property, because I had a little more than just a tenant to the property. I had a 10-year contract with the owner of the property. I have, I guess, the the contract's still underwrite. Not only a triple net lease, I had a first right of refusal to purchase. I also have an exclusive option to purchase the property at June 30th of this year. Met with the city staff. Originally, I was offered $100 as a tenant to this property, and my subtenant was offered $1,500. I pay about 1/3 of the monthly cost related to this property. The subtenant pays about 2/3. I thought that was a pretty big disparity in price difference, plus I was not offered any compensation related to the purchase option, first right of refusal. And so I was pretty concerned, voiced my concern, kind of both to the property owner, to the city staff. Ultimately would not have signed the tenant agreement that was offered to me at $100. Talked to my attorney, he agreed, didn't seem reasonable. So we were willing to go to condemnation hearing 2 weeks ago. That was scheduled for, I believe, March 7th. It was a Thursday that week, whatever day that was. The night before, I was told it was canceled because they came to agreement with the property owner. Came, I think, back in December, actually agreed with the subtenant. I do have a tentative agreement with the property owner for me to tear up that contract. It's not completed yet to date. But I also realized in the meantime, and I apologize with my profession, I don't get around to that end of town as much. I realized the city or subcontractors have already been on the property and staked it out without my permission, without any compensation. I guess I just not sure what's going on. And I don't know. I assume at the end of the month I will be out of this contract. The property owner has attempted to get me out, and we've got, like I said, a temporary agreement, but it's not fulfilled yet. I contacted his attorney yesterday and told him I'd be here tonight. He was going to talk to the property owner and attempt to get that finalized and finished. But I guess I'm just asking, one, I don't know why the city's on the property without my permission or any indemnity in case there was some damage, because I have responsibility even under the temporary agreement through the end of this month for any damages to the property. And so I've got just a lot of concern there, no compensation, no indemnity from the city, just a lot of questions, really. I don't know. I don't know where to go from it.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Anyone further on this item? Open it up for council. Questions, Mr. Miller? Or comments from staff?
Can we get some clarification?
The markings that are on the property. Typically, when we're going into a condemnation hearing the day before, stakes are put out, painting, so that when the condemnation commission goes out to the site, we're able to explain the area being acquired, what's temporary easement, what are the changes. So because this agreement was reached the evening before the condemnation hearing, obviously earlier that day, the markings had been put out there in order to prepare for that.
Anything further?
I would just add, Mr. Mayor, that we were informed by Mr. Roth's attorney that the matter was resolved. There'd be no need for a condemnation hearing, and they would be forwarding to us the documents, and that Mr. Roth would be willing to sign any documents that were necessary to finalize from the city's end. That's why the condemnation hearing did not go forward.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Mr. Boer?
I was just curious, when there's an owner and a sub-owner, do you deal with all parties or just the owner?
Typically, when we're negotiating a property or making an offer goes to the owner of the property, and then any tenants are offered what the established rate is for the corridor project. So West First Street, it was $100 for each of the tenants. Our appraiser asks for information from the property owner about any leases, and received the lease in this case, and there's a sub-market rental on it, so that's why the sublease tenant payment was higher.
Anything further from council? It's been motioned and second. This item requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item 33, is there a motion to allow bills and payroll?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. It requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next item, does council have any referrals this evening? Mr. Miller?
This is kind of an update and kind of a referral, I guess, if I can mix and match those, or tell me if I'm out of line, or however. First off, I want to say thanks to Mr. Heath and the Public Works Department for all their effort this weekend, getting the floodgates open and dealing with a whole bunch of unexpected. So thank you, and I know there's a fair amount of people, at least for certain on Cottage Road, that are very appreciative of everything you guys did this weekend. Along with that, one of the things that we figured out this weekend, or we came to understand a little bit better, is that the flood gauge being on the First Street Bridge is not accurate when the gates don't open and when there's an ice jam. So I would like for us to have a conversation, if it needs to happen at goal setting, or sooner than that if possible, but regarding some other, if there are any opportunities as far as using different gauges or finding different places to make sure that the public at least gets accurate information regarding flood events in these types of situations. It's super rare. I mean, it only happens potentially once a year in most cases, but for some of the folks on Cottage Road that I spoke with this weekend, the flood gauge and what they were actually seeing on their property was 2.5 foot different. And that is somebody getting all of their things out of their house or not. So to me, I feel like we can do a little bit better than that, and I don't know whether that or how that all comes together. I would imagine getting certification for another sensor or another gauge for the USGS is probably not feasible, but I feel like we can get people at least some better information, and I don't know how that comes together, but I hope we can have a conversation about it at goal setting if need be.
We can go goal setting, or if you want to follow normal and bring it up for referral now that council knows about it in the future, that'd be fine too. Or you can make a motion now if you'd like.
I was making the motion right all in that one big motion.
Second.
I'd second.
Motion second, open it up for discussion. Council? Mr. DeCruz?
I just have experience on the Mississippi River and watching the measurements upriver, and you've got a whole barrage of points where they record water levels, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't add one above the dam somewhere that makes sense to the DNR or whoever decides where they go. Very helpful information. And speaking from experience watching the Mississippi rise and fall with property right on the water, I understand exactly what these people are going through.
Very good. Anything further?
I'm not by any means an expert, but what about, doesn't the University of Iowa, aren't they doing some sort of study? Is that a possibility to get additional sensors through that project?
I hope it's part of the discussion, but the Iowa Flood Center, yeah, they do a lot of gauging that USGS does not. So, you know, there were folks that live on Lone Tree Road out by Blackhawk Park that typically see water coming over the road at 93.8. The gauge was saying it was 92.8, and they already had water over the road. So, you know, there's all sorts of variables in the accuracy of that, but between 08 and 16, the water came in differently for everybody in the neighborhood out there. And I guess the least we can do is let's get the most accurate information we can to people so they've got time to prepare and have a conversation about it. So.
Very good. Anything further?
Just while the attention's on Public Works, the last meeting we had, we were still in the throes of winter, but I don't know that we tell Public Works enough how much we appreciate what they did throughout the month of February and first 2 weeks of March, keeping us safe and cleaning our streets and reacting to one bad thing after another and doing it pretty much on no sleep, I'm guessing. So somehow I hope you can get the word to your staff that the majority of the people in this community, even though you hear complaints, really appreciate what you've done, how you do it.
Piggyback on that. I saw the guys on Sunday filling potholes.
Yep.
Well done.
Well done.
Anything further? Motion second for referral. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item, does City Council have any updates? There was a couple conveyed to me. Stephanie, you had one regarding the visioning for City Council and the public version of this coming up?
Yes, just wanted to announce we're working on getting the word out about the kickoff to the visioning for the downtown. We've named the process. We'll be going through this process in multiple areas throughout the community. The downtown's going to be the first one. So we've named it Our Cedar Falls Imagine the Possibilities. And the downtown visioning will be kicking off with a public kickoff meeting on April 2nd. The day before, the evening before, City Council will have an overarching goal setting related to the visioning and downtown zoning work. So during those first couple days of that first week of April there, the consultant will be in town and we'll be talking about the downtown.
Great, thank you. I had a real quick update that came through for a press release, but due to the flooding, voters in Cedar Falls Ward 1 and Precinct 1, who normally vote at the Eagles Club on Lone Tree Road, will now vote at Cedar Falls City Hall, and this change is just for tomorrow's March 19th special election only. I'm going to finish up with a quick update, all things Brian Heath. You picked a good time to substitute in for Mark Ripplinger. Just an update overall as far as the last few days, and I think today we hit finally the 4th gate going up. But if you don't mind, a couple minutes there, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'll just go over some of the activities that took place beginning last week, I guess, middle of the week. We had 2 events. Both were flooding type events. However, one was river related and one was not. One, we had the event I'll cover first is the Cypress Street area where we had some overland flow due to heavy rain and snow melt that occurred, ponded in a field, finally broke loose and entered into the Cypress Street area around Joy Street and inundated some homes and caused some property damage there due to the wet conditions. A lot of water damage in certain homes there. That has mitigated to a point now where now the cleanup efforts have begun. They will continue through April 12th. Public Works will be cleaning up the flood debris out in that area. We'll be collecting material curbside as well as waiving fees at the transfer station for anybody that wants to haul that material in. We made a full sweep through there today, got everything cleaned up, and we'll monitor that and pick up as necessary until the project is complete, until we're done with the debris removal. The other major event we're facing, the Cedar River flooding, which I think the last time we seen an event this early was March of 1961. This is also the 6th highest flood that we have seen in history of Cedar Falls, of recorded history, I should say, at 95.04. So with that, there's several challenges this early in the year. We still had an ice sheet on the river as late as Saturday afternoon until that broke free and there was ice jams, as you talked about, with the fluctuation in the river gauges. Once that ice broke free, our gauge jumped up to what the flooding level was, which was that 95 range. Large accumulations of snow melt coupled with the rains caused all of this to begin with. The ice packs contributed. As Councilman Miller mentioned, our floodgates were stuck, they were froze shut. The situation we run into early in the spring, typically that whole face of that gate is exposed on the downstream side, so it's hard to tell how deep into the upstream side them floodgates freeze. So we had a very difficult time getting them open. In fact, one at a time until finally today we got the last gate open after it thawed out enough. The ice flows created dangerous situations for those homeowners on Cottage Row. There was large 2-foot thick slabs of ice that with the higher water levels came into the neighborhood out there and caused some property damage. So moving forward, we're going to work on getting flood cleanup preparations in order here, and then we'll follow through with those as the water recedes. Meanwhile, during this time, public safety had been out. They flew a drone on Saturday and developed a plan in case there was need for medical attention out on Cottage Row. So that was a very important aspect of this whole thing and trying to figure out, okay, if we need to, you can't go upriver like you normally would with a boat. you would have had to boat in right up through Cottage Road to get to somebody in need. They developed a plan and kind of was able to monitor the situation, and if the need was there, they were ready to go. So again, I mentioned as the crest passes now, our focus will be on cleanup. Not only the Cottage Row area, but we've got impact on Lincoln Street, on Big Woods Road, the Cooley Street area, as well as Lake Street, Lone Tree Road. So we'll be monitoring all of those and taking care of cleanup efforts as the water recedes. I will also mention that there are 50 additional cleanup kits out at Fire Station number 2. They're available to residents as the need arises. And we'll probably be mounting another cleanup effort for residents as needed as the water subsides on the Cottage Row area, Big Woods Road, Cooley Street, in them areas.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor, I just have a question as a follow-up for that. From the flood tabletop exercise that the city did, was it 2 weeks ago? If what we actually saw, was it anticipated by the tabletop exercise, or was it a very different event than what we'd?
When we talk about the flood mitigation plan or the flood preparedness plan, that's a guideline that we use. With the situation that we had here, we used that as a guideline. However, we had to deviate from that somewhat because we knew we had large quantities of ice accumulation upstream, and our river gauge wasn't showing us the true level of the river. So we knew that we would probably need to start preparing our flood walls at 7th Street Railroad Crossing, which engineering and the water reclamation facility staff prepared and deployed that. And then there was discussion with CFU in terms of putting up additional flood walls if needed, and that plan was put in place also. So yeah, we used it as a guide, but in this case, you kind of, you do what you need to do based on the circumstances.
Anything further? Thanks again. Item 34, is there a motion to go to executive session to evaluate the performance of the city administrator pursuant to Iowa Code Section 2151I following public forum? Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next item is a public forum. Speakers will have up to one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. Anyone here from the public that'd like to speak tonight? Mr. Slenick, go ahead, sir.
Hello. Jeremy Selenick, 1008 Rockland Street. Since it seems like every time I'm up here it's something negative, I am going to thank the mayor very much for pushing some pictures through so that I can share with everyone what we're kind of going through out in our North Cedar neighborhood. So I don't know if we can just go ahead and whatever ones you want to pop
Danny,
up.
do you have those? There you go.
All right. Okay, this is my driveway here. And where you see the person standing there, my oldest son, is the egress window that filled with water and busted out the window and flooded the basement. My wife and my 9-year-old son were down there trying to save his stuff because once the water started coming through the, the slider, it was like, well, it's a lost cause now. In the past, and this has been happening since 2005. I've been there since 2003, and it's been, varying levels. Most of the time, it's never gotten past that fence you'll see over there on the edge of my driveway. On that edge where that snowbank is on the right side, there's a good foot drop off there. And it's never, usually gone past that fence. So as you can tell, this was a major event for us. I've got some neighbors, John Metcalf, he's been flooded, his basement's been flooded 3 times from this. This year, Scott Benorden's was in his daughter's bedroom fighting this.
You want the slide to go forward? Just let Denny know that. Sorry.
For right now, we can just.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
He was in his daughter's bedroom, and the bedroom door was closed. They, and he's trying to fight off the water, and the window broke, and he was trapped inside the room. So, the concern there would be, what if his daughter was in there, and she couldn't break the door, you know, those doors are hollow cores, but, you know, what if she couldn't break out? Because his basement did fill completely up. So if Denny wants to show the pictures of the debris here, that's just a start. We're still not finished with ours. We don't have a whole lot of help right now. Let me go to another one. Okay, that's my neighbor Dan Schuerman across the street. He's never had water in his garage before, so obviously you can see he's lost a guitar amp and some power tools and stuff. Next one. That's Scott's basement. That's his entire basement, washer, dryer, freezer, all of his daughter's possessions, everything. And then the next one, and there's from John's. I think John's finally given up on trying to have a finished basement. He said he had 17 inches of water in his garage. Like I said, it's been going on since 2005 at varying different levels. And this year somebody finally got a hold of the property owner that owns the field, and they claimed that they were unaware that the berm that they had either eroded or been removed. So, sometimes we get told by the city, well, we can't do anything about it. It's a natural process. The water, the snow melts, it comes through your neighborhood. That's what you got. But apparently at one time there was some kind of flood control there. And I'd like to see the city work with that landowner to do something about this so we don't have to keep going through this. As everybody here is aware, we had a fire 2 years ago and lost everything. Get a brand new house, a year and a half old, and insurance won't cover this. It's considered a flood. So we're out. It's whatever we can scrape together to refinish the drywall and the rest of my neighbors too. I'm sure, flood insurance doesn't cover much anyway. I was told by my insurance agent that even if we had flood insurance, it would just cover mechanics. Thanks. Sorry about that. I had so much I wanted to say. I really should write this stuff down, but, I would like to see the city work with that landowner to stop this from happening because, I talked to the city administrator and the fire chief, and they say, well, these things are unpredictable. It's like, not for us. We know it's been happening since 2005. It might be unpredictable what day it's going to happen, but we know it's coming every spring. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. I will, before the next speaker, open up for any council comments or questions to staff or each other, the previous speaker.
Director Sheets, are you aware of the property he's referencing in the berm, and if that's a public project or a private project or anything of that nature?
I am not aware of that, but that is something I wrote down to look into.
Thank you.
Very good. Next, someone up for public speaking, sir? Your public forum, you bet. Yeah. Just your name and address, and make sure that microphone's right there for me, please.
My name is Dale Old. I've been here before, and my phone rang up for a number of people calling me, and I would like to express some opinions I hadn't even thought of before, that city council here, you're being blamed for union busting, and you're going to have to stop and think and listen to me just for a little bit. If you got problems here, you've got to straighten out. You've got the two different departments. You're saying if you have a plumbing leak, call an electrician. And to me, that doesn't make much sense, but that's what you're doing with your fire and your police right now. And, then you got to stop and think you've got combination fire and police. Say you've got your wife's cooking fish. You got a grease fire. You dial 911. Call the operator and says, sorry, we can't get anybody there. We've got a problem with the gun at one of the schools, or maybe up to Western Home or shooter. So there's going to be nobody coming to your place because all the combinations are going to have to make a choice where they're going to go. We need more firemen. We've got to get some more firemen because we're losing them. And I don't know how many we've lost yet. We've heard we're going to lose a couple more. And, it's getting to the point where what's a fire department per shift? 1, 2, 3, 5, 10? How many's on a shift? And how many trucks do we need? Maybe get rid of some of the trucks. And as far as the firemen, what they're doing, if you got all your part-time firemen and part-time policemen in the squad cars working, who's taking care of the equipment? Somebody's got to maintain the hoses so the truck starts, make sure it's got gas. All that stuff's got to be done by somebody, and, you need a fireman. They're going to be living there. They're going to be taking care of it. We need to think about that, and I realize, that they're talking about the response. They get there in less than four minutes, but you stop and think about your fire truck. They're there with a police car with a fire extinguisher. You got to have a fire truck there. You got a 40-foot machine, say 10 foot tall, 8 foot wide, trying to go around your roundabouts, trying to get in there, going through traffic. It's something you got to think about. And if that makes it in 4 minutes, then we're doing great. But I don't think you can all the time. And I think you need to think about the fact that we're going to need more firemen. We're going to need them. And some of these firemen, what we call in the trade, were 90-day wonders, Hawkeye Tech cadets. They went to schooling, but they don't have any practical or working knowledge. And you're trying to get them. And professional firefighters, usually, from my understanding, is there are 3 or 4 years before they really become an authorized fireman. And we don't have that anymore. How many we have left, I don't know, and I'm not going to get into that. But I realize that we do need more firemen. We do need policemen. I'm not arguing about policemen. But we need to take a look at that and take a hard look. And maybe you need to split the fire department and the police department up. And if you've got a fire chief that thinks that these people are okay and are taking the place of professional firemen, you need to address that issue with him. And I thank you for your time, and I apologize for bothering you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Before the next speaker, open it up to comments or questions from council. Previous speaker. About the next, Mr. Vajpayee.
Ishan Vajpayee, 3831 Convair Lane. I was just kind of wondering what the process would be of being a little bit more aggressive of condemning as a nuisance that strip that runs from west to east of, so Slumberland, you got to drive down that to get behind Hy-Vee Gas, and then you got to drive, that kind of corridor. You got Panera and Carlos O'Kelly's to the north and Hy-Vee to the south. And it's really a road going through those businesses, but I've been told that it's a private property, and it's really a nuisance when it comes to the potholes. And there's holes there that are clearly not just from this winter. I mean, there's a hole there that took down about half of my 18-inch wheels. That's not from this winter. It's from an accumulation of this mall owner who won't repave that place. And so something's got to be done, because it really is a road. It's a thoroughfare. And if they're not going to do something about it, I would hope the city would be as aggressive going after them to fix their nuisance as the city is over an inch gap or half-inch crack on somebody's sidewalk that gets the magic pink dot. So that's just something that I think is, if we're going to be developing that stretch a little bit more, that's something that they should be taking a task on as well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Vajpayee. Open it for council. Questions, comments?
Director Sheets, can you?
We have a development agreement related to that area that we can take a look at to give council some follow-up information about the areas that they were required to then maintain. We also then, in 2015, when we updated a lot of our codes related to rental concerns, we adopted a provision for nuisance on private property related to issues like this. So we could also take a look at, if we don't have something in the development agreement, handling it through code enforcement.
And you can bring that information back to us.
Yes.
Is there a time frame from which we might ask those folks who own that road until we can do something and charge them back, if you will? I don't mean to pinpoint. I know we have potholes all over the city, but previous speaker back in that road, it's ridiculous. It's unbelievable. So is there a trigger there to say, we'd like to have you folks do this in a week, and they don't do it, we can do it and charge them back? Is there any recourse, I guess, to the previous speaker's questions?
I don't think so at this time. However, I would assume that the insurance claims that they may get could be an incentive to address it instead of having to deal with all these claims that they might get from folks.
I'll jump in here. If the development agreement doesn't cover this, and we'll check on that, private nuisance, it can be abated and charged back. So we have remedies.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Anything further from council? Next speaker.
I'm going to ask real quick.
Oh, here you. Go ahead.
I have to hold it up. Mr. Rogers, is there a time frame that we have to wait for a pothole to get so big before it triggers the nuisance to trigger, you know what I'm saying, get after them quicker, or, you know?
I don't have dimensions for you, but it's anecdotal. If it's a true problem for people being there that can be abated, then we can take action.
Thank you.
Anything further? Next public speaker, anybody wants to speak? Ms. Pop?
Good evening. My name is Penny Pop. I live at 4805 South Main. I'd like to comment on the importance of public forum, on the business conducted in these chambers, and my personal experiences in participating. Not so long ago, I heard about an issue that affected me, so I got involved. I started attending council meetings, planning and zoning meetings. I met with staff, council members, and the mayor. I read everything that was available about the city that I live in, and I spoke at public forum. Good things happened from these experiences. I met a boatload of my neighbors, the great folks of Cedar Falls. We started a neighborhood association, and we came together and discussed comments, questions, and concerns in a respectful way. It is a safe place to ask hard questions. Early on, I thought public forum was a safe and respectable avenue for folks who wanted to express thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns about the city we live in. And over time, my personal opinion has changed. What changed my mind? It certainly was not the folks who stopped me to talk after I spoke at public forum, whether we agreed or not. Maybe it was the hateful and threatening notes dropped off in my mailbox. Maybe it was my flat tires. Maybe it was the folks who flipped me off. Or maybe it was the response, reaction, stares, and glares that I received at the last city council meeting after I spoke at public forum. If you watched on TV, you certainly missed part of the proceedings. I have a right and a responsibility to ask my city hard questions. I am respectful of the business that is conducted here. In return, I expect my city council, who I believe is my public voice, to respond in kind. Now, not every topic is going to be comfortable. That's the problem with hard questions. And I've learned that it's okay to ask hard questions. So I will ask again. What is my city council's stance on the arrest of a current council member on an OWI charge? My opinion is this. As an elected official, I hold you to a higher standard in your actions and behavior. Since your action and behavior has affected my trust in you as my public voice, I have no other option than to ask my city council to take action against you. Trust has been broken. I fully understand that a mistake has been made, but the choice that you made was yours alone. Your decision-making process, in my mind, is now in doubt. How can I trust your decision and votes made on my or on any public policy that affects me and my city? Now, I've asked a hard question. I realize that. And I hope City Council will be able to answer it for me tonight. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Pop. Before the next speaker, I'll open up for council for questions or comments to each other or staff. Next public speaker. Anyone else? Yes, Roger.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Roger White, 2303 Greenwood Avenue, Cedar Falls. I'm also a member of the Cedar Falls Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and I'm speaking on behalf of the committee as I present to you tonight. Over a year ago, the committee requested that the city clear snow from some of the multi-use trails during the winter. There was a meeting with representatives from the committee and also from the Cedar Trails Partnership, and we met with the mayor and with Ron Gaines. The recommendation for the clearing of trails was discussed. Previously, the city had obtained cost estimates from for subcontracting out trail clearing from a private vendor, and that turned out to be very expensive and not very feasible. My takeaway of the meeting, at the conclusion of the meeting last year, was that the new multi-use trail along University Avenue would be cleared in the future, and that some of the other recommended trails would be cleared on a trial basis. But the understanding was clear by all of us that street clearing was a priority before any trail work would be done. The 6 recommended trails that we had proposed at the time were Waterloo Road from Main Street out to Pfeiffer Park, Cedar Heights Drive, Green Hill Road, South Main Street, Hudson Road, and 12th Street, and along with the continuation of University Avenue, of course. These were selected because of their connectedness and or the number of users. A few weeks ago, members of the public approached members of our committee with concerns over the lack of clearing snow from the trails. They were seeking information and some action from the committee. There was, on their part, an assumption that the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee would be the place to start. The topic was added to the agenda for the committee on our March 5th meeting, and members of the public attended that meeting and presented their case. The committee listened to their plea, told them that we were strictly advisory with no authority for taking action, and that we had previously recommended clearing some of the trails last winter. There was more discussion, and eventually the committee passed a motion endorsing the request for clearing of the same 6 trails that were listed a year ago, and in addition added the Big Woods Road, Lone Tree Road connection, those 2 as one, and obviously the continuation of the University Avenue Trail. We offered to make this presentation to the council tonight, which I'm doing here, to communicate those requests for public action. It's important to note that the request is not to clear all the trails in the city. Some of them are more suitable for winter recreation like snowshoeing and cross-country skiing, and that's a legitimate use. Subsequently, after the meeting, I learned that members of the public were contacting council members with a similar request, and I assume at least some of you were contacted. The rationale for their request was that multi-use trails are valuable routes for transportation and exercise for runners, walkers, and cyclists in winter as well as summer, that the accumulated snow makes the trails impassable, that the packed snow eventually becomes ice, that snow piles at the intersections with streets make the trails unusable for weeks, and that overall it's not a good use of the trail resources that the city has built. There was a feeling among some of the folks that our bronze bicycle-friendly status was inconsistent with the reality, especially since Waterloo, Evansdale, and even Hudson do clear some of their multi-use trails. We realize that this has been a very difficult winter, and no one probably realizes it more than you do, Mr. Heath. And we also realize that clearing of multi-use trails requires resources in terms of time and equipment. I personally do not expect that much can change this winter, and maybe winter's over, I hope. But there will be opportunities for the council to give input before next winter. And the walkers, runners, and cyclists who attempt to use the trails in the winter are asking for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Appreciate that. For the next speaker, anything from council?
Mr. Go ahead.
I received a couple emails from interested parties, and they used University Avenue as their model. That this year we were clearing that, and I've noticed that it's been cleared after every snowstorm. So just for your information, I had contacted Mark Ripplinger, our public works person, and ask if he could begin to look at so far what it's cost per mile to do University Avenue. And because we've not done this over the past, in my mind, purely for financial, like you say, it's pretty expensive to do. But to be consistent with our blue zones and our complete streets and our bike-friendly community status, I think we should look more into it. So anyway, I've asked Mark to kind of do an initial study of what it might cost per mile to clear the trail. Our best chance to have this discussion will be next fall at goal setting, but I'm hopeful that if we have some data from the city to begin with, input from you as to priorities, maybe next year we clear a couple trails and we work towards an overall plan. But I'm hopeful that we can generate enough interest from the council to, at goal setting next year, move this up as a priority. But as you know, things happen slowly here. So, but I got a feedback from Mark that he was going to get that data. So hopefully sometime we do goal setting in October, so it's a ways off. But hopefully between now and then we could start that discussion, at least from my perspective.
Mr.
Thank you.
Did you have something?
Yes, Mr. Heath, I know we've had this conversation a number of winters, at least since I got on council and probably even before that. Did you have anything to add other than what Frank said?
No, I'm aware of the situation, and Director Ripplinger did pass that information on to me, and we're currently collecting that data. We wanted to look at some of the costs associated with it, some of the equipment that may be needed for that, and as well some of the concerns we have maybe after the snow is cleared in terms of melting and refreezing and the safety aspects of that. So we're gathering that data and should have that in the near future here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gaines, because we had this meeting, and maybe I might be wrong, but we got the quotes for some of the bike trails along Green Hill. There was a U shape from around Green Hill up South Main Street, and we had those figures, and I thought we presented that at goal setting.
That's correct, Mayor. Subsequent to our meeting with Mr. White, we did have a meeting with the council, and Mr. Ripplinger actually displayed all of the trails and sidewalks that is the city responsibility currently, and that we do remove snow on now. And at that time, the council voted to keep the same and not add those additional trails. But just as Mr. He said, right now we're putting together a draft of a new presentation that would get all of the current information for us. And we'll bring that forward to a committee meeting probably in June.
Committee or goal setting?
Well, I guess that would be up to the council, how you wanted to handle it.
Okay, no, that's fine. Mr. Dara.
Do we have a new piece of equipment or something that we're using to clean University Avenue that we didn't have before? Or
I don't believe so.
We do have one newer piece of equipment. It's a little bit larger. Some of the snow blowing equipment that we have, or the snow clearing equipment, was a little bit lighter weight, and it was difficult to get through the windrows that you mentioned at the end of the roadways, or the end of the trails where roadways meet the trails. And so that's been difficult on the equipment. It's been hard to maintain that lighter weight equipment. So we do have one larger unit now that we're using to handle the heavier accumulations of snow that are deposited by the plows.
All right. Anything for you, Bruce?
I guess, as I think about this in the discussion here, and I think, Roger, you know I've done many decades of biking, and I can appreciate everything you say. The comment Brian made, you can clear, and others, you can clear the snow, but then melt and refreeze. I don't like road biking on sand, and nobody as does biking likes that. Ice and a bicycle, I wouldn't like that idea either. And to keep these trails ice-free, I think would be worse than the highways because of the grade of the trails as they dip and circle, and they're not built like a road to drain necessarily. I'm assuming some are probably pretty old, and I don't know if, to me that would be a very expensive proposition to get a great extent to keep the ice off for safety and liability reasons.
We can certainly bring it up at discussion.
Yeah. So
Well,
Anything further?
if it's appropriate,
I got to stay consistent, Mr. White, I'm sorry.
Okay.
You comment, and hopefully you were pleased at least with the feedback, and of course, we're always available outside that.
We can talk later if you want.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all you do. Anyone for public comment? You bet, sir. Just your name and address, please, and the microphone right there.
I'm Andrew Schroll. I live at 930 Newman Avenue. I'd actually like to add a little bit to Roger's comments on the same topic that he was just up for. I live near Pfeiffer Springs Park, so I witness a lot of the recreation that goes on there, and I thought I'd add a couple anecdotes quick. So I also feel pretty well connected with the biking, the running communities, and the folks in town that do a lot of recreation. I also feel strongly about getting around town on foot and on bike year-round as you please, and I do that. One of the sections that Roger mentioned was Waterloo Road from Pfeiffer Springs, or 58, over to Main Street. And actually one weekend I decided I was going to go rent a fat bike for the first time from Bike Tech. And I actually had a hard time going to Bike Tech, that section of my journey from my house by Pfeiffer Springs Park, because of the snow at the intersection on the corners, because that snow was deep, so it was difficult to pass as a pedestrian. And then coming back on this fat bike with the big tires that's designed for this kind of terrain, it was actually difficult to traverse with that machine as well, because that section of pavement was not packed down. It wasn't groomed like the wonderful recreation trails that we have in George Wythe and at Big Woods. So it was actually pretty difficult in both modes there to go on that section of trail. I also feel that if we keep it as clear as we can, those sections that Roger mentioned throughout the winter, it would actually minimize the amount of iciness in the spring when people are becoming active again more broadly in the community. We have a lot more bikers, walkers, and runners that come out when things start to thaw out in March and April. And to the concern of ice on the trails throughout the winter, I do feel that for the most part, bikers and runners will not so much be out when the conditions are at their worst or right after they're at their worst. They'll come out on the trails after the sun's been out in a pause in December, January, February, when most of the material has actually been had some time to go away in the sun. And also I do feel like since we have this new machine for University Avenue and other places, we could make better use of that in a cost-effective way in some of these other sections of trail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anything further from council, the previous speaker? Anyone further from public comment? You bet.
Jim Skane, 2215 Clay Street, advocate for the people of Cedar Falls. Councilman Whelan mentioned about the value of the industrial park. But as I understand it, most, if not all, of the industrial park is in an urban renewal project, and even the new one, the South Cedar Falls Industrial Park, which specifically says that every bit of tax money has to be expended within that area. It doesn't go to the people. And the taxes may be low, but have you looked at your utility bill lately? Because your utility bill will say that there's a lot of things there that used to be paid through city taxes. And so we keep our tax rate low by transferring expenses from the city to even streetlights we pay on our utility bill, okay? Also, talking about, this is just a personal thing, half of my street in front of my alley is gone. There's a big, I have to go into the other side of the street in order to get around it, and it's deep. It just occurred in the last few days, but it's there. I want to talk about a tale of two cities, Waterloo and Cedar Falls. In December, there was a Courier article that said that Waterloo and County get money for safer roads. And one of the things that was mentioned was $310,000 to work on the intersection at Greyhound Park and West Ridgeway. And in that situation, they were making it safer by putting a traffic light in and by putting turn lanes in. And they were doing it for $310,000, but they were starting back there at Highway 63 and bringing it forward. Now, that's not much different than the intersection at Green Hill and South Main. We've been recommended to have a roundabout there, and the roundabout costs, I'm not sure exactly what it will end up costing, but about $2 million. It seemed like $2 million. And then they want to do the same thing. And all they need to do is put some turn lanes in and time the light so that both turn areas are done the same. So for $310,000 against well over $1 million, maybe $2 million, I think I would vote for Waterloo. Another thing came out just last Friday. Now I sent these two articles to the council members and to Mr. Gaines and to Mr. Brown. And it says this, that the estimates are under budget for the second phase of theirs. They got 28 million, and it looks like they're going to do it within their 28 million. We got 20 million, and we're going to do it within our 40 million. I mean, council people, you've been here a long time, and you voted for all that. In fact, what I have, and I'm going to be owed time, you know. The gentleman before me had a lot of time, but I'm restricted, okay? It says the alternative recommendation is for 4C, which says it's the least expensive. That's a lie. Now I have to stop, see?
Time is up. Thank you very much.
I have to stop. Time's up.
Thank you. Anyone else further for public comment this evening?
See, that's censorship. That's censorship.
You're out of order, Mr. Skane. Please sit down. Any further comments from council of the previous speaker? I would not be able to go past the fact that we have one of the lowest taxes in the state, but I believe last time CFU presented to us in our joint meeting, 4 out of the 5 utilities they handle were the lowest in the state, and the one that wasn't lowest was the second lowest in the state. Thought I'd mention that. We will now adjourn to executive session. Thank you.